There are fine people on both sides. If you're on the left, and especially if you're a liberal, you probably have no idea what Donald Trump said on that day, where he said there's fine people on both sides. Reason being, you've been told a narrative from sources you trust, left wing sources, liberal sources, and if you say a lie long enough and enough times, you start to believe it's the truth. This is something that's used very effectively on the right. They're doing it right now with the scandal, with the Signal chat situation. Um, I don't know how effective it is being used right now because things are looking a little shaky. But this is a very effective tactic. You keep repeating something over and over again. The Unite the Right rally. Find people on both sides. Let me tell you how this is the left wing kryptonite. Right? So, if I'm a progressive media person and I do a video and I say, Donald Trump, this racist rally, blah, 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 these racist people, white nationalists. And then Trump is on there saying there's fine people on both sides. And then I show you the clip of him saying that. And that's all I show you. I don't show you what happens before or after. Right? If you're on the left, you're liberal, you're going to get all riled up. And you'll be like, that racist Trump. And then you're just going to repeat it to other people and say, did you hear what he said? He said there are fine people on both sides. And you know what you're not going to do? You're not going to treat it the way you would if someone on the right was saying something to you. If someone on the right said that Joe Biden said there were fine people on both sides at a rally where there were white nationalists, you would immediately start investigating. You would start Google searching. You would confirm it. And if it's not true, you would know and you'd say, hey, this is not true. But because it's about Trump, you just assume, of course he would say that, right? And he did say it. It's on video, so you can see him saying it, right? Here's the kryptonite. This means that it's easy to manipulate you. It's easy to lie to you. And it's easy for you to get you to adopt things that aren't true and to believe in them and repeat them and hear them for so many years that it's almost impossible to pull you from the edge and be like, hey man, this actually was wrong. So what's the reality? The reality is Donald Trump both said there were fine people on both sides, and he also clarified that he's not talking about the white nationalists or, white supremacists or whatever. He said that they should be condemned or something to that effect. Many of you, this is shocking because you probably never heard this. You're not going to hear that context given to you from anyone in progressive media or liberal media, with very rare exceptions, probably. All right. This is a kryptonite because this is one of the reasons. If you wonder how the right is able to pull so many people to their side, this is a prime example of how they do it, right? When you do stuff like this, so for someone who's on the center or someone who's not really political, you can go to them and say, hey, the left are just a bunch of liars. Let me ask you something. You heard about the thing about the Unite the Right rally? Did you hear what Trump said? Yeah, he said there were fine people both sides. That's actually not what he said when you look at the full context. Let me show you a video. Here's what he said. And then they hear him say afterwards, he condemns the white nationals. And this person has never heard that before. All of a sudden they have this moment where we're like, holy shit. For years, I believed that he said this thing and he didn't. And I was hearing this from like CNN, MSNBC. I was hearing this from like David Pakman and all these people, the Young Turks, people that I trusted. Wow. What else have they lied to me about, right? And now all of a sudden it's a crazy effect. All of a sudden this person gets shaken up so much that they obsess about this fact that they were manipulated, that they were given something incorrect. And now they focus their attention almost entirely on the left and liberal media narratives. And whoever told them this, I'm sure has a lot of other instances where they can say, hey, like Jacob Blake, for example. I'm sure if you're on the left or you're liberal, you don't know about the second camera angle, right? You don't know about the 911 call. There's a lot of things you don't know about that. What you do know about is how this black man was walking and he shot him in the back and the racist police and da-da-da-da. right? Um, it's just a sad thing that, what gets views on YouTube is chasing trends and pandering and feeding into people's ideology, because this is a very important message that needs to get out. All these big players in left wing media, they need to acknowledge this and remove this kryptonite, remove this weakness, because it hurts their movement, right? I mean, I don't support the movement. I think media should be media, news media should be news media. If you're doing news media, just tell people the truth. Be objective. I don't agree with this whole, progressive media and left wing media and right wing media. News media should not have an ideology. Um, Now things have gotten to a point where they're so crazy where I might have to rethink that. I might have to rethink that, but I'm just going along with what these guys say they're doing. They're trying to get their message out and trying to build a movement. Well, you know, you're hurting yourselves. Trump is a very bad person. There's a lot of very bad things being done by the Republican Party. If you stick to just the truth and facts, you have way more than enough to get your message across about how dangerous the Republican Party is. There's no need to exaggerate. There's no need to, be putting out stuff that's not true. Now, I know a lot of people on the left, they don't know any better, right? Because they only question and are skeptical when it's coming from the other side, right? When it's coming from their side, like a lot of these, left-wing media folks, they get up in the morning, they look on Twitter to see what's trending, and then people they trust are saying stuff. Like back then, oh, Trump said find people on both sides, and they see the clip and they're like, oh, this is great, and they make a video. There's no curiosity. Like, what did he really say? What's the full context? Let me watch the full video. Ain't nobody got time for that. They just trying to get those clicks, trying to get those views, right? So what that means is a lot of them don't know any better. A lot of them don't know what really happened because they didn't look. They don't have the curiosity to look, right? Now, if I were a bad faith actor, like a lot of folks that we see in the media, what I would do is I would say these people are still correct, because let's examine. Okay, he condemned the white nationalists, whatever, but still, the question is, who are the fine people on both sides? Right? There was one side that was trying to defend this statue. Who's the fine person that wants to defend this racist statue? Now, there is some level of, validity to this concern. It's not valid in the context of what we're saying so far, because the response to what I said should be a concession. Oh, wow, I didn't realize Trump actually condemned the white nationalists. Wow, I was misled. That's messed up, right? And in the future, if you want to have another different conversation about, defining who the fine people are, fine. But in this moment, the response should be concession. Should be like, hey, you're right. I didn't realize he condemned them. Wow, okay. I still think he's a white nationalist. I think he's racist, or whatever you think. You can still think that, but in the spirit of honesty, be like, but in this moment, he did condemn the white nationalists. So I'm not even saying you got to give props to him. I'm not even saying you got to say oh, he did the right thing or whatever. All I'm suggesting is that you should acknowledge reality, and the reality is he did condemn them, and the narrative about him saying find people on both sides is dishonest at best without the full context, right? And I know a lot of folks on the right wing like to use this context. And a lot of times it's nonsense, but in this case, it's not nonsense. It's the truth. The full context is completely different from the reality. Now, that being said, it is a valid conversation to have. How fine are people who are defending the statue? But that, I think, is getting a little bit philosophical, or you're getting into the area of opinion, because one could easily imagine some people who, in their minds, maybe they don't necessarily care whether this guy did bad things or not. It's just that he's a big historical figure, and they feel like, we need to have it's part of our history, right? We should sort of protect our history, good, bad, and ugly. But the reality is, we don't need statues to protect our history, right? I mean, it's not like we're taking him out of the books. He's in the books, right? Was it Robert E. Lee or whatever? He's in the books. No one's taking him out. No one's even talking about taking him out of the books. In fact, the people that want the statue down would absolutely want him to stay remembered in history for what he did, right? They would say to you, this guy was racist, right? And that being the case, and assuming that some of that is alluded to in history books, I know initially probably not, maybe more so now. The history books are more woke, so they may, talk about some of the bad things of him. And if that's the case, and even if they don't, they would want him to be talked about more in the history books, not less. Because the history books are only painting him as a hero, then these folks would say, hey, let's add more to it. So no one is talking about removing him from history. However, two things can be true, right? You can recognize that removing the statue is not removing history, and you can also recognize that some people might believe that to be true. They might believe that removing the statue is removing history. Now, I would argue that I think a lot of people saying that are bad faith actors, but the reality is I can't read their minds. And I have to accept that at least some of these people, I mean, we have a lot of people that are not very sharp, shall we say, in this country. So it shouldn't be shocking that some people might actually believe that removing a statue is removing history somehow. And if that's the case, and a person is purely there to preserve history in their minds, might that make him a fine person? But then you have to define what fine person means. The other thing is, and again, we can have this conversation, right? We have it in good faith. We can't just focus on, fine people on both sides. We gotta keep digging. We can't just go beyond that and say, well, hey man, you're trying to defend a racist statue. No, we gotta dig deeper than that, right? So what's the next level? Even if I as a person believe that these statues should be preserved because it's our history, unless I'm not aware that a lot of people who are in this rally are white nationalists, and I believe they're the ones who organized it, so it's kind of hard to accept that you aren't aware of that. Unless you're not aware of who a lot of these people are, why would you be marching with them? I mean, put myself in those shoes. There's a brown-skinned American who slaughtered a lot of pink-skinned Americans in some historical context, some race wars or whatever. Maybe he killed like hundreds of people. And black nationalists are having a rally because they want the statue of this guy to be preserved, while you have a bunch of MAGA people saying it should be removed. Even if I believe that statue should stay up because I believe in the history, I condemn what the guy did, but it's our history and that's how I feel. Even if I feel that way, I am marching with a bunch of black nationalists, right? So here's the thing, man. You can actually have an actual, honest, good faith conversation about this and still arrive at a conclusion that Trump was wrong, and his statement about fine people on both sides, even with him saying, condemning the white nationalists, that he was still wrong, and he was still basically supporting the same people he's supposedly condemning. Because again, what kind of person would be in a white nationalist rally, right, for some other reason? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna be in a white nationalist or black nationalist rally, even if we both want the same thing for different reasons. Now, if there's a general rally happening and there happen to be some white nationalists in there, I mean, and it's a really important cause, I'm not gonna not be there because there's some white nationalists there. But if the rally is organized by white nationalists, which I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, if the rally was organized by white nationalists, my view on whether the statue should be removed or not is not relevant. I'm not trying to march with them. and the kind of person who would knowingly march with a bunch of white nationalists, um, I wouldn't say is a fine person. So when we dig really deep into the situation, I think the conclusion I arrive at is the only fine people in that rally, which would be a very, very tiny group, would be some of the dumbest people in the country. Just completely just brain dead because they aren't smart enough to realize this is a white nationalist rally and maybe you shouldn't be there. Because think about it, right? Who cares whether the statue is removed or put up? Like, how does that affect people's lives? And I understand there's some level of effect. But in terms of, is this the kind of thing that's worth marching with white nationalists? Right? I mean, if it was something about, like, they were trying to destroy a children's hospital and it's the only one in the state or something, right? Like, that's an atrocity. If white nationalists are arranging a rally to support this hospital and say the hospital should not be destroyed, that's something that is so severe that it's kind of like, okay, I don't like white nationalists, but over a statue though, like that's the standard. I'm gonna march with some black nationalists because the statue it's that important. Like, you know what I'm saying? So you could be honest about it, right, and actually be thorough and know what you're talking about, and yet still arrive at the conclusion that Trump is a really, really bad guy. And you look like he actually is, like, out of both sides of his mouth. He's saying he condemns it, but he's supporting it, like, in another way. And then not allow a clown like Dave Rubin to dunk on you and be like, well, you were spreading misinformation about Trump, said find people on both sides, and that wasn't true. Right? And then you have nothing to say. You shouldn't have, right? You could avoid getting so easily dunked on by a buffoon like Dave Rubin by simply being curious about what you're being told, regardless of who's saying it.